Ruth spoke with honesty and clarity, expressing gratitude for the lessons and the trust he had placed in her. She shared her hopes for the future, not only for herself, but for the ranch and the life she was beginning to understand. The rancher nodded, his expression serious but approving. He praised her ability to remain calm, thoughtful, and resilient under pressure. He noted that many had failed in the past because they lacked patience, understanding, or the willingness to learn from every experience. Ruth felt a quiet pride, not from praise or recognition, but from knowing that she had met the challenges with integrity and heart. As night fell, Ruth wrote in her notebook, capturing her experiences, thoughts, and reflections. She described the stories of the rancher, the care of the calf, the planting of the garden, and the work on the fence. She considered how each task had tested not only her skills, but also her character and her ability to understand and respect the land and the people who lived on it. The sounds of the ranch settled into quiet rhythm. Horses moved slowly in their pens, the cattle were calm, and the wind whispered through the trees. Ruth felt a deep connection to the life around her, understanding that the test was more than a series of challenges. It was about becoming part of a world that required patience, respect, and courage. She reflected on the rancher, recognizing the wisdom and strength he carried, and the careful way he measured people not by what they said, but by how they acted, how they listened, and how they adapted. Ruth realized that she was learning something far more valuable than completing tasks. She was learning about herself, her resilience, her capacity for empathy, and her ability to face challenges with intelligence and heart. She felt a quiet confidence, knowing that each day brought new lessons and opportunities for growth. She understood that success on the ranch required more than physical skill. It required awareness, understanding, patience, and a willingness to engage with the world fully and honestly. Ruth slept with the sounds of the ranch around her, feeling the rhythm of life that connected every creature and every part of the land. She dreamed not of winning or impressing the rancher, but of learning, growing, and meeting the challenges that lay ahead with courage and determination. The next day promised to bring new experiences, new tests, and new chances to understand the land, the animals, and the man who had created this unique world. Ruth was ready to meet them, confident in herself and eager to continue the journey of discovery, growth, and connection that the ranch offered. Ruth woke before dawn. The cool morning air, carrying the scent of grass and earth. She stretched and prepared for the day, knowing that today would bring one of the most challenging tests yet. The rancher stood silently near the stable, watching her with eyes that seemed to measure not just her readiness, but her spirit and focus. Without words, he led her to a group of horses and instructed her to select one for a long journey across the property. This was the ultimate physical test, a trial that demanded endurance, courage, and careful decision-making. Ruth examined each horse, feeling their strength and temperament. She chose one that seemed alert yet calm, sensing it would respond to her guidance. Mounting the horse, she felt its muscles tense beneath her, ready for the journey. The rancher pointed toward a winding trail that led into the hills, across a shallow river and through rocky terrain. Ruth took a deep breath and started keeping her focus steady as the horse responded to her movements. The trail was more difficult than it appeared, with uneven ground, loose stones, and sudden inclines. Ruth had to adjust constantly, guiding the horse carefully to prevent slipping. She used what she had learned about observation, balance, and patience, letting the connection grow between her and the animal. Hours passed as she moved along the trail. Her arms ached from holding the reins, and her legs were sore from maintaining balance. The sun climbed higher, beating down on the land, yet she pressed on, understanding that perseverance was the key. Along the way, she encountered a small herd of cattle that had wandered into the path. Ruth had to act quickly, guiding them gently but firmly to prevent chaos. She used a combination of calm voice and strategic movements to lead the animals safely. Feeling satisfaction in managing the unexpected challenge, when she reached the river, she slowed the horse, navigating the shallow water with care. Stones were slippery and the current shifted unpredictably. Yet she kept her composure and trusted the horse to respond to her commands. Crossing safely, she felt a surge of relief and pride. The journey continued through rocky slopes and narrow passes. Ruth noticed how her breathing and movements needed to stay coordinated, how small mistakes could become dangerous. She thought about everything she had learned on the ranch, from understanding animals to adapting to the land. Each moment required attention, care, and courage. The rancher followed at a distance, observing her every move, noting how she handled the difficulties and how she remained calm under pressure. He had seen many fail at this part, losing patience or letting fear take control. Ruth did not. She focused on the present, listening to the horse, feeling the ground beneath, and navigating the obstacles with steady determination. Finally, after hours of travel, she returned to the ranch, exhausted but triumphant. The rancher greeted her with a nod, his eyes reflecting approval. Ruth dismounted, stretching her tired muscles, feeling both relief and pride. The day was not over, however. The rancher introduced a mental and strategic test. He presented her with a situation where she needed to organize the animals and resources for the next day, anticipating problems and planning solutions. Ruth carefully assessed the tasks, considering the needs of the animals, the terrain, and the weather. She wrote a plan that was practical and thoughtful, showing foresight and understanding of the ranch's operations. The rancher examined her plan, asking questions and pointing out areas for improvement. Ruth listened and adjusted her ideas, showing adaptability and intelligence. He was impressed by her ability to combine observation, experience, and reasoning into a coherent strategy. The afternoon brought another challenge, one that required cooperation and leadership. Ruth was asked to assist in training a young group of horses that were difficult to handle. She needed to guide them, calm them, and help them learn routines that would make them ready for work. Many had failed at this task before, unable to maintain control or patience. Ruth approached each horse calmly, moving slowly and confidently. She spoke softly, encouraged the animals, and adjusted her approach based on their reactions. Hours of careful work passed, but by the end of the day, the horses were more manageable. And Ruth felt a deep satisfaction in her ability to succeed where others had failed. As evening approached, the rancher led her to a quiet spot overlooking the plains. He asked her to reflect on the day's challenges, to speak about what she had learned, how she had handled fear, fatigue, and uncertainty. Ruth shared her thoughts openly, discussing moments of doubt and how she overcame them. The lessons she had learned about patience, observation, and resilience. The rancher listened, acknowledging her insights with careful words. He noted that many failed not because they lacked strength, but because they lacked understanding, humility, and the ability to adapt. Ruth felt a quiet pride, recognizing that she had grown through the trials, learning not just physical skills, but the deeper qualities that defined the life of the ranch. Night came, and Ruth settled near the campfire, writing in her notebook. She described the journey across the hills, the moments of difficulty, the lessons learned from the animals and the land. She reflected on the connection she felt with the rancher, the trust being built and the confidence growing within herself. The ranch was alive with the soft sounds of the night. Horses shifted in their pens, the wind whispered through the trees, and the distant calls of animals reminded her of the rhythm of life around her. Ruth felt part of that rhythm, aware that her journey was not just about passing a test, but about becoming part of a world that required attention, care, and courage. As she closed her notebook, she looked at the stars beginning to appear, feeling both exhausted and fulfilled. She knew the final test would come soon, one that would require everything she had learned: skill, intelligence, empathy, and courage. She was ready to meet it, confident in her abilities and determined to show that she could face challenges fully and honestly. Ruth understood that this day, like the ones before, was more than a test of physical skill. It was a test of character, heart, and the ability to remain steady under pressure. She had learned to listen, observe, and adapt, qualities that set her apart from those who had failed in the past. As sleep approached, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection, appreciating the journey, the growth, and the strength she had discovered within herself. She felt a connection to the land, the animals, and the rancher, a connection built on respect, learning, and shared experience. The final test would soon arrive, but Ruth was no longer the same person who had first stepped onto the ranch. She was stronger, wiser, and ready to face the challenge with courage, patience, and understanding. The night passed peacefully, the ranch quiet but alive, and Ruth rested with confidence, prepared for whatever the coming day would bring. Slowly there, and everyone knew everyone else. The town had a main street with a few wooden buildings, a general store, a small church, and a dusty saloon where people gathered in the evenings. But there was one place that drew attention from near and far, a large ranch at the edge of town. It belonged to a man who was half Apache and half settler, a man whose reputation was both feared and respected. He had a rugged look, dark eyes that seemed to see through people, and a presence that made others pause when he entered a room. His ranch was huge, with wide pastures filled with cattle and horses, and buildings that were sturdy and well-kept. People said he was not only strong and skilled, but also wise in ways that came from the land and his heritage. Many women from nearby towns had tried to win his attention over the years. Drawn by stories of wealth, adventure, and the challenge he set for those who wished to be with him, he had a test, one that no woman had ever passed. It was not a simple challenge. It required endurance, intelligence, courage, and respect for the life and traditions of the rancher. Women who came to attempt the test often found themselves overwhelmed by the physical demands. Some could not handle the long hours riding horses across rough terrain. Others struggled to care for the animals or manage the chores that were part of daily life on the ranch. Many failed when they tried to answer questions about the land or the rancher's culture, showing a lack of understanding or respect. Some gave up before they even started, intimidated by the man himself, who spoke little but observed everything. Despite the difficulty and the failures of those who tried before, the challenge continued to attract women who were curious or ambitious. They brought with them hope, determination, and sometimes a desire for something more than their quiet lives could offer. The townspeople often gathered to watch, whispering among themselves about who might succeed and who would falter like the others. One woman named Ruth had heard of the test from travelers passing through. She was not like the others who came for fame or fortune. Ruth was quiet and thoughtful, but there was a spark in her that made her willing to face difficult situations head-on. She had grown up learning to be self-sufficient, understanding that life could be hard, and only those who were persistent could overcome challenges. She watched the ranch from a distance, noticing the way the man moved with confidence, how he handled the horses, and the calm control he had over the land. Ruth did not feel afraid. Instead, she felt a sense of curiosity and determination. She wanted to see if she could meet the test and what it would teach her about herself and the world around her. As she prepared to leave her home for the ranch, Ruth gathered the essentials she would need. She packed practical clothing, sturdy boots, a hat to shield her from the sun, and a small bag with food and water. She also carried a notebook to write down observations and thoughts, something that had helped her in the past when facing new experiences. She left her home early in the morning, walking along the dusty road toward the ranch. The sun was just rising, casting a golden glow over the plains and hills. Birds were beginning to sing, and the air was crisp with the freshness of the day. Along the way, she thought about the stories she had heard from others, the women who had failed, and the tests they could not pass. She felt no fear of failure because she understood that learning from each challenge was more important than winning or losing. When she reached the edge of the ranch, she stopped to look at the buildings and the animals. Horses grazed peacefully in the fields, and the cattle moved slowly, as if aware of the presence of someone new. The rancher appeared from a building, tall and strong, his expression neutral but his eyes watching carefully. Ruth straightened her back, took a deep breath, and walked toward him. She greeted him politely with respect, noticing how the wind moved through the open space and how the land seemed alive with possibilities. The rancher studied her silently. He could see that she was different from the others who had come before. She did not wear fancy clothes or act overly confident. Her eyes held curiosity, and her posture showed determination. He decided to speak with her, asking questions about her experience with horses, animals, and life on the land. Ruth answered honestly, sharing what she knew and admitting what she did not know. She spoke with confidence, not arrogance, showing that she was willing to learn and adapt. The rancher nodded, impressed by her sincerity. He led her to the first area of the ranch where the work would begin, explaining the daily tasks and what would be expected. Ruth listened carefully, taking mental notes and asking thoughtful questions to ensure she understood. The other workers on the ranch watched with interest, noting how she moved with ease despite the new environment and the physical demands. As the day went on, Ruth began to engage with the work. She learned to saddle a horse quickly, to lead cattle through gates, and to handle tools and equipment that were new to her. She stumbled at times, but each mistake was met with a calm persistence. She picked herself up and continued, learning from every step. The rancher observed from a distance, occasionally giving advice or demonstrating a technique. He noticed how Ruth adapted quickly, how she did not complain, and how she seemed to find solutions rather than dwell on problems. At the end of the day, Ruth sat quietly by the fence, watching the sunset over the fields. The sky was painted with colors of orange and purple, and the wind carried the scents of grass and earth. She felt tired but satisfied, knowing she had faced the first day with courage and determination. The rancher approached her, saying little, but his nod showed approval. Ruth smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment. She realized that the first step in the challenge was not about winning, but about showing resilience, respect, and willingness to learn. That night, as she settled in a small cabin on the ranch, Ruth reflected on the day. She thought about the land, the animals, and the lessons she had already begun to learn. She understood that this challenge would test not only her physical abilities but also her patience, intelligence, and heart. She closed her eyes, ready to face the days ahead, knowing that the journey would be difficult but also rewarding. Ruth was no longer an observer. She had become part of the life of the ranch, and the rancher had begun to see that she might be different from all the women who had failed before. She felt a quiet confidence in herself, ready to meet whatever challenges the next day would bring. The story of Ruth and the ranch was just beginning, a story of courage, learning, and the quiet strength that comes from facing life with honesty and determination. Ruth woke early the next morning with the sound of horses moving in the pens and the soft light of dawn spreading across the ranch. The air was fresh and smelled of earth and hay. She felt a mix of nervousness and excitement as she prepared for the day ahead. Today would be her first real test on the ranch, and she knew it would be more challenging than yesterday. She dressed in sturdy pants and a shirt that allowed her to move freely, tying her hair back so it would not get in her way. She carried a small bag with food and water, and her notebook to make notes of anything important she learned. As she stepped outside, the rancher was already at work, inspecting the fences and checking on the cattle. He looked up and nodded at her, a silent greeting that carried both expectation and caution. Ruth returned the nod and approached him, ready to begin. The first task was to ride a horse across a long stretch of uneven terrain to check the fences on the far side of the property. Ruth felt the familiar nervous flutter in her chest, but she focused on the horse beneath her, listening to its movements and learning its rhythm. The rancher followed at a distance, watching her carefully. As Ruth rode, she noticed the land changing with every step. The grass grew taller, wildflowers dotted the fields, and the wind carried the distant sound of a creek. She focused on the fences, checking for any gaps or damage. She worked steadily, moving the horse with care, and taking note of areas that would need repair. The rancher occasionally called out advice, but mostly he remained silent, observing how she handled the situation. When she returned, he had a list of other tasks for her. She needed to help guide a small herd of cattle to a different pasture, mend broken fences, and assist in preparing feed for the animals. Ruth tackled each task with determination, asking questions when she was unsure and carefully watching the rancher to learn his methods. The work was hard, and the sun beat down on her as the hours passed. Her arms and legs ached, but she did not stop. She understood that endurance was part of the test, and she welcomed the challenge. Around midday, the rancher led her to a part of the land where the horses grazed freely. He asked her to select one horse to ride for a more difficult task. Ruth examined each horse, paying attention to its behavior and movement. She chose one that seemed calm but alert, knowing that she would need both speed and control for the upcoming challenge. The rancher nodded in approval, a rare expression of recognition for her judgment. He explained the task. She would need to navigate a rough trail along the edge of a hill, cross a shallow creek, and return in a set time. Ruth listened carefully, memorizing the route in her mind. She mounted the horse, feeling its muscles tense beneath her. The town was small and quiet, surrounded by wide-open plains and rolling hills that stretched as far as the eye could see. Life moved. The trail was more difficult than she had expected, with rocks and roots that threatened to trip the horse. She focused on keeping her balance, guiding the animal with gentle commands, and using her instincts to judge the safest path. At one point, the horse stumbled on a loose rock, and Ruth felt herself lean forward to steady it. She whispered to the horse, her voice calm, and it regained its footing. She breathed a sigh of relief and continued, adjusting her path to avoid other hazards. She crossed the creek carefully, feeling the cool water splash against her legs and the horse's hooves. The trail continued uphill, and Ruth encouraged the horse with gentle nudges, maintaining a steady pace. When she returned to the ranch, she was exhausted but proud of completing the challenge. The rancher was waiting, his expression unreadable, but there was a hint of approval in his eyes. He handed her a small notebook and asked her to write down her observations and reflections on the tasks she had completed. Ruth sat under the shade of a large tree, writing carefully about what she had learned. She noted how the horse responded to her commands, the behavior of the cattle, the difficulties of the terrain, and the ways she had adjusted to meet the challenges. Writing allowed her to think through her actions, understand her mistakes, and recognize her successes. As she finished, the rancher returned and asked her to join him on a short walk across the property. They moved in silence, observing the land and the animals. He asked her questions about what she had noticed, and she answered honestly, sharing insights and admitting where she was unsure. The rancher seemed pleased by her openness and willingness to learn. Later in the afternoon, the rancher introduced a new challenge. He brought out a group of young horses that were not yet trained. Ruth was asked to help guide and calm them, preparing them for future work on the ranch. The other women who had come before her had failed at this task, frightened by the horse's energy and unpredictability. Ruth approached each horse with calm confidence. She spoke softly, letting them get used to her presence. She moved slowly, respecting the animal's space, and used gentle pressure and guidance to encourage them to follow her. It took time and patience, but she gradually gained their trust. The rancher watched from a distance, noting how she remained composed, even when a horse resisted or acted unpredictably. As the sun began to set, Ruth had managed to calm several of the young horses and lead them back to their pens safely. She was tired, covered in dust and sweat, but she felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had learned not only about the horses, but also about herself and her ability to remain patient and focused under pressure. The rancher approached her, speaking for the first time in several hours. He asked about her feelings during the tasks, how she had handled moments of fear or uncertainty, and what she had learned about the land and animals. Ruth spoke honestly, reflecting on her experiences and the lessons she had gained. The rancher listened carefully, nodding occasionally, and for a moment he allowed a small smile to appear on his face. The evening brought a chance for rest and reflection. Ruth sat by the campfire, writing in her notebook about the day's challenges and her thoughts about the rancher and the land. She considered the ways in which she had grown, the skills she had developed, and the areas where she still had much to learn. She felt a sense of pride, not for completing the tasks perfectly, but for meeting them with courage and determination. During the night, Ruth could hear the sounds of the ranch settling into quiet. The cattle moved slowly in the pens, horses shifted their weight as they rested, and the wind whispered through the grass. She felt connected to the land in a way she had never experienced before, aware of the rhythm and life that flowed through the ranch. She understood that the test was not just about physical skill, but about understanding and respecting the land, the animals, and the man who had set the challenge. Ruth slept lightly, thinking about the next day and what it might bring. She knew that each task would require her to be more observant, patient, and courageous. She welcomed the chance to learn, knowing that every experience on the ranch was an opportunity to grow. As dawn approached, she awoke once more to the sounds of the animals and the first light spreading across the fields. She rose, feeling stronger and more confident than the day before. She knew that the rancher was watching, assessing her not only for her abilities, but for her character, and she was determined to show that she could meet every challenge with honesty, intelligence, and heart. The day ahead promised more trials, each designed to test different aspects of her strength and understanding. Ruth was ready to face them, ready to prove herself, not for recognition or reward, but to learn and to grow, to understand the life of the ranch and the man who had created it, and to discover what she was truly capable of in a world that demanded courage, patience, and wisdom. The next morning, Ruth woke before sunrise, the sky a soft shade of pink and gold. She felt the aches from the previous days, but also a quiet determination that carried her forward. The rancher was already outside, moving among the cattle with a quiet grace. Ruth joined him, noticing the calm control he had over every step, every action. Today would be different, she sensed, not just about physical skill, but about understanding, empathy, and heart. After the morning chores, the rancher led her to a small clearing surrounded by tall trees and wildflowers. He asked her to sit, then began to tell stories of the land, of his family, and of his Apache heritage. He spoke of hardships, of loss, and of the lessons learned from the land and the animals. Ruth listened closely, feeling the weight and depth of each story. She noticed the pride and respect he held for his ancestors, and the careful way he preserved their knowledge. When he finished, he asked her what she thought of the stories, if she understood the lessons within them. Ruth spoke honestly, sharing her impressions, the emotions the stories stirred within her, and the questions that arose. The rancher nodded, acknowledging her insight and sincerity. Then he set the next challenge, one that tested more than strength or skill. He asked her to help care for a sick calf, explaining the delicate nature of its condition and the care it would require. Many women had failed at such tasks, showing fear or hesitation when faced with vulnerability and responsibility. Ruth approached the calf with calm hands, speaking softly and moving carefully. She followed the instructions he had given, learning as she worked, observing the animal's reactions and adjusting her actions to its needs. Hours passed as she tended to the calf, washing it, feeding it, and staying close to calm it when it became restless. She felt a deep connection with the creature. Recognizing that understanding and patience were just as important as knowledge and strength, the rancher observed quietly, impressed by her gentleness, focus, and empathy. He asked her questions about the calf, testing her understanding and reasoning. Ruth answered thoughtfully, admitting what she did not know and explaining what she had learned through experience. After the work with the calf, the rancher led her to a small stream on the property. He asked her to reflect on the past days, the challenges she had faced, and the lessons she had gained. Ruth sat on a flat rock, feeling the water rush over smooth stones, and thought deeply about her experiences. She realized how much she had grown in a short time, how her perspective had changed, and how her respect for the land and the rancher had deepened. As the day progressed, the rancher introduced another challenge, this time testing her ability to work with the land in a creative way. He asked her to help plan a small garden for the ranch, considering the needs of the animals, the soil, and the available space. Ruth examined the area, noticing the sunlight, the soil quality, and the water supply. She sketched a simple plan, taking into account the needs of both the rancher and the animals. She suggested plants that could provide food and shelter for the animals, using her knowledge of nature and careful observation. The rancher studied her plan, asking questions and offering advice. Ruth listened and adapted her ideas, showing her willingness to learn and collaborate. He was pleased with her thoughtfulness and practical approach, recognizing that she was not only capable, but also considerate and intelligent. Later in the afternoon, Ruth was asked to help repair a section of fence that had been damaged in a storm. She worked alongside the rancher, lifting posts, hammering nails, and measuring distances. The physical labor was demanding, but Ruth approached it with determination and care, ensuring the fence was straight and secure. As they worked, the rancher spoke about the importance of resilience, both in work and in life. Ruth listened carefully, reflecting on how the lessons applied not just to ranching, but to challenges she had faced in her own life. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the land. Ruth felt the fatigue in her muscles, but also a deep sense of fulfillment. She had faced physical, emotional, and intellectual challenges, learning from each one and growing stronger and wiser. The rancher gathered her for a final reflection of the day. He asked her to speak about her feelings, what she had learned, and how she had changed since arriving at the ranch. The sun rose slowly over the ranch, casting long shadows across the fields and pastures. Ruth stood quietly, feeling the cool breeze on her face and the warmth of determination in her heart. Today was the day of the final challenge, the last test that would determine if she had truly passed the trials set by the rancher. She prepared herself carefully, reviewing everything she had learned over the past days. She dressed in sturdy clothing, tied her hair back, and carried her small bag with essentials. She walked toward the rancher, who was already at the edge of the main field, his expression calm but attentive. He pointed toward a winding trail that led deep into the hills and valleys of the property. Ruth understood that the final challenge was not only about skill and endurance, but about judgment, patience, and courage. She mounted her horse and felt its muscles tense beneath her, ready for the journey. The rancher gave a few instructions about the route, but much was left to her judgment and observation. Ruth set off along the trail, her eyes scanning the landscape, noting the position of rocks, the patterns of the trees, and the movements of the animals. She encountered rough terrain, steep inclines, and narrow passes. Each obstacle required careful navigation and focus. She guided her horse with gentle commands, maintaining balance and awareness, using everything she had learned in the days before. Along the way, she faced several unexpected challenges. A small herd of cattle had wandered into the trail, and Ruth had to guide them safely without causing panic. She used patience and strategic movement, letting the animals respond to her calm direction. The rancher followed at a distance, observing her methods and the way she handled the difficulties. A sudden storm rolled in, dark clouds covering the sky, and strong winds sweeping across the fields. Rain began to fall, making the ground slippery and the trail more dangerous. Ruth adjusted her pace, guiding the horse carefully, keeping both herself and the animal safe. She found a sheltered spot under a rocky overhang, waiting for the worst of the storm to pass, and considered her next steps. She reflected on the lessons learned from the rancher, the importance of patience, observation, and adaptability. When the rain slowed, she continued the journey more focused than before, her mind alert to every detail of the land and her surroundings. The trail led her to a narrow river crossing, where water rushed over smooth stones. She guided her horse carefully, feeling the cool water splash around her legs. She concentrated on balance and trust, both in herself and the horse. Across the river, the path led through dense brush and uneven ground. Ruth moved slowly, aware that every decision mattered. She used her instincts, her knowledge of the land, and her understanding of animals to navigate safely. She paused occasionally to observe, to plan her route, and to ensure that she remained on track. As she neared the end of the trail, she encountered a young horse that had become separated from its group. It was frightened and hesitant, unsure of what to do. Ruth approached slowly, speaking softly and extending her hand. She calmed the animal, guiding it back toward the herd, using gentle reassurance and patience. The rancher watched closely, noting her ability to handle a situation that required empathy, courage, and quick thinking. Finally, Ruth returned to the ranch, exhausted but triumphant. The rancher stood near the fence, observing her arrival with a steady gaze. She dismounted, her body tired but her spirit strong. She felt a deep sense of accomplishment, knowing she had faced every challenge with honesty, patience, and determination. The rancher walked toward her, speaking for the first time in the day. He asked about the journey, how she had handled fear, uncertainty, and the unexpected events along the way. Ruth spoke openly, sharing her experiences, the lessons she had learned, and the ways she had adapted to meet the challenges. The rancher nodded, listening carefully, his expression showing quiet approval. He praised her for her perseverance, intelligence, and courage. He noted that she had demonstrated qualities that set her apart from those who had failed before, not just in skill but in character. Ruth felt a sense of pride, not from recognition, but from knowing that she had truly met the test. She had learned about herself, her strengths, and her ability to face difficulties with calm and thoughtful determination. The rancher invited her to walk with him across the property. They moved in silence for a time, observing the land, the animals, and the life that continued around them. He asked her questions about her reflections on the journey, the decisions she had made, and how she had grown through the challenges. Ruth spoke with honesty, sharing insights about the land, the animals, and her own development. She described how the tasks had tested not only her body, but her mind and heart, and how she had learned to respond with patience, observation, and care. The rancher nodded, impressed by her self-awareness and understanding. He explained that the true test was never about completing tasks perfectly, but about demonstrating integrity, adaptability, and respect. Ruth understood, realizing that the challenges had been designed to reveal character as much as skill. As the day continued, Ruth helped with the evening chores, assisting with the animals, feeding them, and checking the fences. She worked steadily, aware that her performance was observed not only for physical skill, but for the care and attention she put into her work. The rancher occasionally offered advice, and Ruth listened carefully, integrating his guidance into her actions. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and purple, the rancher gathered her near the main cabin. He spoke about the qualities he valued, the importance of resilience, intelligence, empathy, and courage. He acknowledged that Ruth had met every challenge with honesty, determination, and thoughtfulness. He told her that she was the first woman to truly pass all the tests, not by chance or luck, but by showing understanding, skill, and heart. Ruth felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had not only succeeded in the challenge, but had grown as a person, learning about herself, the land, and the life of the ranch. She understood that the journey had taught her patience, careful observation, and the value of approaching every task with calm determination. That night, as Ruth wrote in her notebook, she reflected on the entire experience. She recorded the lessons she had learned from each task, the challenges she had faced, and the ways she had grown. She considered the trust she had built with the rancher, the connection she had formed with the animals, and the understanding she had gained about the land and its rhythms. She felt a quiet confidence and a sense of belonging that she had never experienced before. The ranch was peaceful under the night sky, the sounds of animals and wind creating a rhythm that was calming and familiar. Ruth felt part of that rhythm, connected to the land and the life around her. She knew that passing the final test was not just about recognition, but about becoming part of a world that demanded respect, courage, and thoughtfulness. In the days that followed, Ruth continued to work on the ranch, taking on responsibilities alongside the rancher. She applied the lessons she had learned, continuing to grow in skill, understanding, and empathy. The rancher treated her as an equal, valuing her judgment, her care for the animals, and her thoughtful approach to every task. The other workers on the ranch also noticed the change. They respected her for her determination, patience, and the way she faced challenges without complaint. Ruth had earned her place not through charm or appearance, but through her actions, her heart, and her character. Over time, she became an integral part of the ranch, contributing to its success and helping maintain its balance and harmony. She continued to learn from the rancher and from the land, recognizing that growth and understanding were ongoing journeys. The story of Ruth's journey through the tests spread among the nearby towns. It inspired others not to seek recognition or reward, but to approach life with patience, courage, and thoughtfulness. Ruth's experience became a story of true character and perseverance, showing that success comes from integrity, determination, and the willingness to learn from every challenge. Ruth understood that her journey on the ranch was more than passing a test. It was about becoming part of a life that required awareness, care, and strength of character. She faced challenges with courage, learned from every experience, and earned a place of respect, trust, and belonging. In the end, Ruth's story was one of growth, resilience, and the quiet power of facing life honestly and fully. She had met the final test, not only surviving it, but thriving, and doing so had discovered the strength and wisdom that would guide her for the rest of her life. The morning air on the ranch was crisp and filled with the sounds of the land waking. Ruth rose early, feeling the calm energy of the property and the connection she had formed with it over the past days. Today would not be a test in the usual sense, but a chance to solidify her place on the ranch and show how much she had grown. She moved quietly through the cabin, preparing herself for the day ahead. The rancher was already outside, checking the livestock and the fences. He noticed Ruth approaching and gave her a nod of recognition, a silent acknowledgement of the hard work she had put in and the progress she had made. Ruth took a deep breath, feeling both calm and alert, knowing that today would require attention, care, and the continued application of everything she had learned. Her first task was to assist with the morning feeding of the animals, a routine she had come to understand well. She moved among the cattle and horses, guiding them, ensuring that each received what it needed and observing any signs of illness or distress. The rancher watched closely, noting the confidence and efficiency with which she handled the tasks. After the feeding, he presented a new challenge, one that involved problem-solving and strategic thinking. A portion of the fence on a distant side of the property had been damaged by recent weather, and the livestock needed to be moved safely while repairs were made. Ruth quickly assessed the situation, considering the terrain, the location of the animals, and the tools available. She created a plan, organizing the movement of the herd in a calm and orderly way. She gave clear instructions to the workers and coordinated the tasks, making sure the animals were guided without stress or confusion. The rancher observed silently, impressed by her ability to manage both the animals and the people involved. Throughout the morning, Ruth worked steadily, adjusting her plan as new challenges arose. A young calf strayed from the herd, and she quickly diverted her attention to bring it safely back. A horse became restless, and she handled it with gentle firmness, keeping it calm while maintaining control. Her actions were deliberate, thoughtful, and effective. As the day progressed, the rancher introduced another test, this one requiring both creativity and understanding. He asked Ruth to plan a small area of the ranch that could be used for both grazing and future planting, considering the needs of the animals, the soil, and water sources. Ruth examined the land, taking notes on sunlight, soil quality, and natural features. She sketched a plan, balancing practicality with care for the environment. The rancher reviewed her work, asking questions and offering suggestions. Ruth listened carefully and adapted her plan, demonstrating flexibility and thoughtfulness. He nodded in approval, recognizing her growth in judgment and planning. Later in the afternoon, a small storm approached. Ruth noticed the dark clouds and the sudden change in wind direction. She quickly organized the animals, moving them to safer areas and securing equipment that might be affected. She worked efficiently, keeping calm under pressure and ensuring that the land and animals were protected. The rancher watched her closely, noting her ability to respond to unexpected challenges with intelligence and composure. After the storm passed, Ruth assisted in repairing fences and clearing debris. She worked tirelessly, guided by what she had learned about resilience, patience, and careful observation. Each action was purposeful, demonstrating her growing skill and understanding of the ranch and its operations. As the day moved toward evening, the rancher called Ruth to join him on a walk across the property. He asked her to reflect on her experiences, the challenges she had faced, and the lessons she had learned. Ruth spoke openly, sharing her thoughts on the importance of patience, observation, and adaptability. She reflected on her connection with the land, the animals, and the people who worked alongside her. The rancher listened with quiet attention, impressed by her insight and the maturity of her perspective. The final part of the day involved preparing the ranch for the coming night. Ruth ensured the animals were settled, the gates were secure, and the land was safe. She moved with calm efficiency, her mind alert to potential problems and her actions guided by the lessons of the past days. As night fell, Ruth sat quietly by the campfire, writing in her notebook. She recorded the events of the day, her reflections on her growth, and the insights she had gained from working closely with the land and the rancher. She considered how much she had learned about resilience, patience, and careful observation, and how these qualities had helped her succeed where others had failed. The rancher joined her, sitting quietly and watching the flames. He spoke softly about the importance of trust, respect, and understanding in every aspect of ranch life. Ruth listened, feeling the depth of his experience and wisdom, and recognizing how much she had absorbed from the time spent learning and observing. Over the next days, Ruth continued to take on responsibilities across the ranch. She applied her knowledge and experience to every task, from caring for animals to maintaining the land, always thinking ahead and observing carefully. She worked alongside the rancher, learning from his guidance and integrating his lessons into her own actions. The relationship between Ruth and the rancher deepened, built on mutual respect, trust, and recognition of each other's abilities. Ruth found satisfaction not in praise but in the knowledge that she was contributing meaningfully to the life of the ranch. She understood that success was measured not by external validation, but by competence, care, and the ability to adapt to every challenge. The other workers also noticed her growth and reliability, respecting her for her skill, patience, and thoughtful approach. Ruth had earned a permanent place on the ranch not only through her abilities, but through her character and dedication. She continued to grow, learning new techniques, improving her understanding of the land, and strengthening her connection with the animals and the people around her. Each day brought new challenges, opportunities to apply her knowledge, and lessons that furthered her growth. The rancher often reflected on her journey, recognizing that Ruth had become more than a helper. She had become a true partner in the life of the ranch. Her insights, judgment, and careful approach had proven invaluable, and her presence brought balance and harmony to the work. As time passed, Ruth felt a deep sense of fulfillment. She had not only passed the tests, but had grown into a confident, capable, and thoughtful person. The experiences had taught her resilience, patience, empathy, and the value of careful observation and understanding. The ranch had become her home, the animals and land part of her daily life. The rancher, a respected mentor and companion in shared responsibility. Ruth reflected on her journey from the moment she first arrived. It's uncertain and curious, to her current state, confident and capable. She appreciated the lessons learned, the challenges overcome, and the trust earned. She understood that true success came from persistence, adaptability, and approaching every task with intelligence and heart. As the sun set each evening, Ruth would sit quietly, observing the land and animals, reflecting on her growth and the journey she had undertaken. She recorded her thoughts, insights, and lessons in her notebook, knowing that each day held new opportunities to learn and improve. The rancher often joined her, offering guidance and sharing his own reflections, further strengthening the bond of trust and mutual respect. Ruth had become a living example of perseverance, intelligence, and empathy. She had faced tests that challenged her physically, mentally, and emotionally, and had emerged stronger and wiser. Her journey inspired others to value patience, careful observation, and thoughtful action over superficial skill or charm. The ranch had transformed from a place of challenge to a place of learning, growth, and shared responsibility. Ruth had discovered her own strength, gained confidence, and earned a respected place among the land, animals, and people of the ranch. In the quiet moments of reflection, she understood that the true reward was not recognition or praise, but the growth and understanding she had achieved. She had met every challenge with courage, patience, and determination, and in doing so had become a part of the life and legacy of the ranch. Ruth knew that the journey would continue, that each day would offer new lessons and opportunities for growth. She felt ready to face whatever came next, confident in her abilities and grateful for the experiences that had shaped her into a capable, thoughtful, and resilient person. The ranch had become not just a place of work, but a place of learning, connection, and personal growth. And Ruth had earned her place within it through honesty, effort, and heart. Her story became one of perseverance, careful observation, and the quiet power of resilience, inspiring those around her and leaving a legacy of determination, empathy, and thoughtful action on the land she had come to love and protect.